Grazie di essere venuti al secondo incontro di DESIGNTALKS che Scuola Politecnica organizza in collaborazione con Capitale. Sono molto felice che Richard Hollis, che è qui seduto accanto a me, abbia accettato di venire. Gli studenti di Visual Design di questa scuola già lo conoscono, in particolare come autore di un libro molto importante sulla storia della grafica, uno dei probabilmente dei meglio fatti. Ma il motivo per cui l'abbiamo invitato qui oggi è proprio il suo ruolo di designer, anche quando racconta la storia del graphic design lo fa sempre con l'occhio del professionista e non con l'occhio dello storico. Gli interessa raccontare come venivano fatte le cose, perché venivano fatte in un certo modo, e lui stesso ha delle idee molto chiare e molto precise su qual è il ruolo del designer nella società. Quindi un designer che nei suoi lavori non vedrete mai uno stile riconoscibile, una firma Hollis, e quello che è riconoscibile è il suo metodo, che è sempre molto, molto vicino al contenuto, molto vicino al cliente con cui lavora. Ha sempre lavorato nel corso degli anni, praticamente sempre, a parte un breve periodo, come designer indipendente, e su una piccola scala, su piccoli progetti, però è proprio questo. Non siamo qui per vedere le grandi cose, ma proprio come si può lavorare con grande fedeltà al contenuto. Richard è anche una persona dalle idee molto chiare, che esprime sempre in maniera diretta e chiarissima. Ha vissuto in prima persona un periodo interessante, quello tra gli anni 50 e 60, in cui il modernismo nel graphic design si è diffuso in Europa. Ha conosciuto in prima persona quello svizzero, l'hanno fatto conoscere l'Inghilterra, un paese che, se volete, è stato un po' estraneo al movimento moderno rispetto ad altri, e quindi proprio in quanto rappresentante di questo modo di lavorare, di questa visione del design in un paese che magari non è stato completamente coinvolto, è ulteriormente interessante sentire le sue parole. E vedrete un lungo percorso di progetti che comincia dagli anni 50, arriva fino adesso. Vedrete che ha lavorato soprattutto nel territorio delle arti, perché ha una formazione iniziale come artista, ma anche un'esperienza pratica nella stampa, per cui è una persona che conosce molto bene le tecniche, che con queste si confronta. Tutti questi elementi confluiscono nel suo lavoro in un modo che secondo me vale proprio la pena che voi conosciate, se non avete ancora avuto occasione di farlo finora. Io approfitto del fatto che qui con noi in prima fila c'è Italo Lupi, che magari voglia dire anche lui due parole sul lavoro di Richard, e poi gli passiamo la parola.
Poter passare la parola immediatamente a Richard Hollis, perché quello che ha detto Silvia mi sembra assolutamente completo rispetto al suo lavoro. Io potrei aggiungere solo un benvenuto a lui e ricordare l'emozione che ho avuto quel giorno che a Londra ho comprato il suo libro Precise History of Graphic Design, e mi sono accorto come si poteva fare un libro di storia del design in un modo differente, e accorgermi, per me un modo abbastanza emozionante, di vedere, riconoscere in modo molto forte e stabile la scuola che lui ha chiamato Scuola del Design. Questo libro, che io ritenevo e ritengo ancora anche erede di una tradizione inglese nell'affrontare la storia in un modo molto chiaro e molto semplice. Io quando ero ragazzo leggevo i libri di storia, cose che non riguardavano la grafica, ma non so, la storia dell'Inghilterra, del Trevelyan, o la storia d'Italia di Dennis McSmith, e agli storici inglesi che si occupano di raccontare i grandi avvenimenti del mondo o gli avvenimenti di una disciplina come quella del design, devo riconoscere una chiarezza che nel libro di Richard è straordinaria. Io mi ricordo alcune riviste che avevo visto negli anni 60, credo, tra cui spiccava questo libro, credo appartenente a una corrente del lavorismo fabiano, forse New Society, e che aveva questa chiarezza di impostazione che ricordava il suo amore per la noia grafica svizzera, credo un po' anche nell'impostazione generale. Riconosco in lui un'amicizia con Facetti, per esempio, perché credo che l'impegno di tipo anche sociale che ha contraddistinto tutti i suoi lavori sia una derivazione da queste frequentazioni straordinarie che in quegli anni potevano essere esercitate. Niente, non mi dilungo perché sarei noioso, passo la parola a Silvia.
E io passo la parola a Richard. Well, thank you again, Richard, for accepting our invitation, and well, after maybe I will ask you a few questions because it would be interesting to get more in detail, but then now it's for you. May you use this microphone? Thanks.
Sono molto onorato di essere qui a Milano. Per noi il centro del design del mondo. Sono molto spiacente di non saper parlare italiano, and so I will speak, I'm sorry, in English, but I hope you will be able to be seeing things on the screen which will to some extent explain themselves. I'm going to talk largely about folding pieces of paper. So it's not a theoretical talk. And although I now write about design history, and as well as design, I started working as a designer more than 50 years ago. So it's with examples of my own work that I'll illustrate what I'd like to say. So inevitably this is also talking about history, because most of the work predates, it is before the computer was used. That is to say, it was before digital typesetting and the possibility of bringing images onto a screen and manipulating them, which had to be done almost physically. That's to say, most of the work is from the period of photography. It was from the period of chemistry. And a great deal of the work is before full-color printing was economic. And another aspect of the work that I'm going to talk about is the question of economy. In other words, maximizing the possibilities, the opportunities that are available, in a sense, to give value for money, which makes it exciting to invent ways of doing things. The other aspect is the consideration of the person who is using what is they are presented with, what happens when they take something out of an envelope, or how something is sent to somebody, and also how it is dealt with the printer. Now, the first image on the screen, I'm starting with perhaps the most boring, but what is often misunderstood is that graphic design is part of an industrial process. And a large part of it is this question of huge sheets of paper which are then folded up. And in many ways this controls how something looks, because you're starting often with fixed sizes of paper, fixed processes, and a whole fixed technology. Now, folding, I suppose, is almost an obsession with me. It's something that has fascinated me. And this is something that I did in an amateurish way in the early 1960s, after I'd been to Cuba, just after the Castro Revolution. And I simply took photographs. They were taken on a square format camera, and I wrote about my experiences and made what was a large sheet of paper by having the photographs turned into screened negatives and placing all these negatives on a piece of transparent film over a glass-topped table, which was my normal table at which I ate. So that it is in a way done purposely in a rather crude way to show that this is not design, it is something else, and it is printed all in black, and the lettering in the top left where it says I being the point that it is from a personal point of view, that it is not objective. And there's a passport stamp which makes the other colour in the top right-hand corner, so there's an entry tube on the top left and an exit stamp on the bottom right. These were facsimile stamps which I had made. So that shows this sort of folding, and this was sold for 1 penny. In other words, whoever took it made a loss selling it. Now, I worked for many years for a London art gallery, and this is what somebody who was on the mailing list of the art gallery took out of the envelope. Now there is a complete message in this part of the paper. So when it is unfolded, you see much more of the message. So you imagine what is happening when somebody is receiving this, and we'll see more of this when it became more sophisticated later. But you can see that in each part of the fold there is a separate piece of information. I'm sorry that you can't see the bottom, which is shared by Katana Patient, which is very appropriate to showing it here. Now, as I worked for longer at Whitechapel, it became obvious that while we disliked the Deutsche Industrie Normen, the DIN sizes of paper, because of their, I would say, unaesthetic format, it was simply practical because of folding things into envelopes to use the DIN size of paper. And this is all the posters for the Whitechapel Gallery at this time were sent out as A3 sheets folded to go into a business envelope. So that here is the envelope, and with coming out of it is a news sheet telling people what was going on while this exhibition is on and giving a summary. And also in darker colour, an invitation to the private view. So all these things came out of the same envelope. And this was the news sheet when it was folded up to the size of a business envelope. Now, all the work at this time was printed only in 2 colours. And it was done by pasting up every element. And for example, this sculpture by the English sculptor, letter designer Eric Gill, was given a texture which was slightly stone-like by putting it in process camera with a particular screen, which is the sort of thing nowadays was do in Photoshop. But in those days it did, the designer did it on a process camera and then pasted it up. And this was given to the printer as what was then called camera-ready copy. When the new sheet was opened, this is what it looked like. So that as the person opened it, gradually it unfolded the information. The typeface that was used was something which was late 19th century typeface, which appeared at about the same time as the Whitechapel Art Gallery was built. That's why it was chosen. And so everything, all the headings were done in this block typeface, and all the texts throughout were done in centuries. This is the front of a guide to the same exhibition, again with the same typefaces. We tried never to print in black ink and never to print on white paper. I don't know why, but it was kind of another of these strange obsessions at the time. This was a two-part exhibition, so these are the things that came out of the envelope from the second exhibition. And this was the second exhibition was the gallery guide using the large Roman figures of the typeface to separate the sections, and this was actually an 8-page document, which was unusual. Well, the architect, Christopher Wren, we made an ordinary A4 poster as well as a very big poster, so that the poster came out of the envelope together with this guide to the exhibition. Again, you can see this printing in two colours. This was in fact printed with black as well as this dark maroon colour. And Christopher Wren's signature used with his Si Monumentum Requiris Circum Species was the slogan of after his death. So if you want to see what Christopher Wren built, look about you. And on the back of this new sheet was a map, which meant that the exhibition, in a sense, continued in the streets, because you could walk around the city of London using this map. In these circular, these dots, you can see are in fact numbers, and the numbers refer to the churches which people could visit on the map. And this was the new sheet which people would have taken out of the envelope. Again, they're printed in red and green, not using black. And here's a more complicated use of two colours, using an orangey red and a blue, so that the image of the immigrants to the east end of London is shown on the right in the documentary photograph, which is in fact printed as a duotone in red and blue. And then almost every element of the lettering on the left is these, again, made up of, it is either red on the background or red and blue printed over one another. The date 3rd to 21st of August is red on blue to give this black effect. And similarly, with the main sights and sounds of the East End is also made up of tints, various percentages of red and blue. Now, all these A3 posters, as you can just about see where they were folded up. So, if you look at the top left part of the poster, you would have at the white sheet. So, as you took the thing out of the envelope, you would see what it was. Again, printed red and green, and at the bottom you have we've got Polish photography using Polish red and white colours, and again using red and green, which is something I used a great deal. This is simply red and a darker red printed on a yellow paper. You can see here the folds go as much vertically to divide up the information into these little parcels of information, so that you get 18th of January, and then when it's open, and the V on one side, then you get the Whitechapel on the central column, which is like an art gallery admission fee, in the central column. So I'm played with the actual textual content. Now, a rather more complicated use of folding was in a poster for the Biennale 20 years ago, where this was the poster printed only in Italian, a large poster, much probably about A1 size. And when it was folded up, printed on the back of it was the information about the exhibition and about the artist, and on the right-hand side, a catalogue. Now, the top half is all the text in English, on the bottom half, all the text in Italian. And by the way it was folded, you had one set if you went into the British Pavilion, where it was folded up in such a way that this is what you picked up. You picked up the English, or you picked up the Italian when it was folded in a different way. But everybody got both the poster and the catalogue and an introduction for nothing. This was when you saw the English side and the lens that was folded up. So that was the other side of this. Now, I showed the poster again because part of this drive for economy was actually to use the separations, the film separations, or the four-colour printing of the poster. That section of a poster was used to make the whole wrap-up for the catalogue, which was a separate book. And you can see where the image folds round as a jacket to the book on the inside. And you can see one of the other interests, of course, is to try to retain a continuity between all the items which belong to a particular event, a particular exhibition, so the same typefaces are used throughout. Even more complicated and earlier than this were catalogues for two artists who were being shown together in the same gallery. And you can just about see at the bottom of this, the way it is folded, that the front in colour is actually, this is a card outside to this, which we'll see in a moment. And you can see the names of the artists down at the bottom, in one in red at the bottom is Geoffrey Camp. So that as the thing unfolds, and this is the other artist whose work was shown at the same time, around Neil, and you can just about see the folds here. So that on the other side, when it was unfolded, the cover which you just see is the back of the top element here. So that on one side you've got a colour cover, and on the other side you've got a catalogue, and on the other side of that you had the individual essays and introductions to these artists' works. Now, these were both printed together. The exhibition went together and the printing went together. So this was printed as one piece of card for the outside and one piece of paper for the inside, and then cutting them off. So this was again maximising the amount of money that was available to do the job, and to end up with every one you hope be pleased. The reason for this particular way of unfolding was that the artist Geoffrey Camp painted at the seaside, and probably here, but in every tourist place, certainly in England at the seaside, you had postcards which unfolded in exactly this way. Often you could then tear them off and send them out, so that this was an acknowledgement of where this particular artist worked. Now, it seems that this way of working became a habit, but until sorting out things for this talk, I haven't realised that actually I'd done the same sort of thing again, putting on probably about 10 years after that. Now, this again was an exhibition of the Crafts Council in London, which at that time had a very large gallery. And it was a joint exhibition of somebody who was a woodcarver who made wooden plates and all kinds of wooden objects turned on very complicated lathes which he devised himself. And also there was an exhibition of pottery by English craft potters. Now this was the poster for the two exhibitions together when they were at the Crafts Council. Now the exhibitions individually then both toured around England to different venues. So this poster had that central section removed from the printed plates of the black and the green plate. So that you ended up with this, because this is black, blue, orange and green. So it was in fact using the 4 units of the printing press. Now this was then cut down the middle, because on the back was printed the catalogue for this, for the David Hyde, the wood carver. And the other side had all printed on the back of it, this is in fact the pottery catalogue. Now, I did the same sort of thing for various galleries. This was for what was called the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford, for which I did all the letterheads and a lot of stationery. But about 4 London designers shared between them the whole season. So one would do the spring exhibition, and then another one would do another exhibition, and then we would take it in turns until eventually a large design firm took over the whole thing and we were all out of work. But this again was a folder, so it unfolded in a similar way, but in a much bigger way. And there were, as you can see, several exhibitions went on at the same time. So you had both the Soviet exhibition together with Wayne Michaels, with films and photographs, and also a fairly conventional painter. And then on the right-hand side you had listed the whole calendar of events at the gallery. Part of this was that you could fold it around so that you had the events listed as a calendar, as a quite simple thing. You could even cut it off. The idea was that people could then stick it on their door of their refrigerator. This was another folder, much more general. One of the things you may notice is maybe also peculiar and exceptional is the use of punctuation. The quotation marks at the beginning of this phrase and at the end, and then saying here in Oxford. It's somehow a way of making text more as though it's somebody speaking to you. Now, with this also, where it says here in Oxford, in fact this is an aerial view of Oxford, and we'll see what happens when you unfold it. And then peep down in a little circle on the right, as though they're being spied on, is people crowding into the gallery here in Oxford. Then, when it was unveiled, a list of exhibitions here in Oxford, there are all these things going on in this year of 1985. And so the whole program is displayed. It's very difficult to see vertically, but the dates are in these blue vertical strips. Again, this is something, as usual, printed in only 2 printings in blue and black. And this is the other side of the leaflet, so that on the right-hand side, you see this aerial photograph taken from the air, and you see this little arrow pointing down to actually where the gallery is in Oxford. Most people in Oxford would have known press of Oxford, but they very rarely, in those days, this was a long time before you had Googles, which would show you what things look like from the air. So it was something which actually intrigued people, because this was directed more to people in Oxford than people outside. You can see, incidentally, on the left-hand side, where this logo, the way the words Museum of Art Oxford, I've amended this by putting a little face, some eyes at the bottom of it, to give it a little extra thing. Another exhibition which affected the way in which you made a folder for it, or an unfolder, was if you had 4 designers, 4 people and their designs, it was inevitable almost that you chose an unfolder which had 4 parts to it. What I may as well also mention that is because these artists were working more or less in the 1930s, the typeface was inevitable and used the Guild typeface, which was designed and used first around that period. And this it was here used for the text as well. But you can see that a story of 4 people and their designs inevitably divides in this way, so that you get Bendings and Nancy Nicholson, Kitty Nicholson, and E.Q. Nicholson, with each having a little section to themselves, so that you can use the structure of a piece of paper actually to structure the message, although the message will suggest also, conversely, the structure of the paper, of the graphic. This is an invitation printed on very, very thin LM paper, rather very recently, which unfolded. In this way you can see how thin the paper is. Again, it's printed in only 2 printings. It's very difficult to make out the type at the top, which was it was actually just a tint of grey. And the painter used a lot of silver paint. And what I did very riskily was to print a silver half-tone with a black tone, one on top of another, which when it was unfolded looked like this, so it had a sort of sheen. And this is actually a reproduction of a work by this artist who used messages with stencil lettering for this particular exhibition on this silver ground. So it was again almost as though the person receiving this in the mail was also receiving part of an artwork. Now, this is a folder where the actual cutting of the paper contributes to how it is. Again, it is a mixture of the content determining how things work. Now, on the right-hand side, you see these very narrow folders, which, as you unfold them, you can see that they go with a CD of what you might call modern music, modern classical music. And each track that you see on the top, the 3rd column to the right, it says 8901, which shows the point at which this sound appears on the CD. And when this is unfolded, it produces this kind of stepped structure. Now, again, this was printed in this way on a single piece of paper. Then it was cut diagonally. And after it was folded, then the top trimmed off, so that you got the top and the bottom flat. Like that. This is all cream colour, it's just that the photograph makes it. Now, this is rather moving on to what are really sheets of paper folded up still. Sheets of paper which have then wound on after folding, glued on the folded side and trimmed on the other side to produce pages, which are a technique which has existed for centuries. And what I was showing here was the way of attempting to integrate the elements of a book which involves less folding than the question of sequence. But sequence is something which is inevitably involved in unfolding the sort of brochure that we've been looking at. So here the story unfolds more as you turn the pages. And putting, and from the cover, which should tell the person picking it up. And what I often try to do, as you'll see, is to try to make people pick up a book in portrait, know what it's about, by having plenty of words. But here, this was trying to say that avant-garde graphics is not to do with design historians, but is to do with the people at the time in the background photograph. So that when you open the book, instead of having graphics, you get the people who are the receivers of the graphics at the period back after the First World War. And then, in a way, the book then unfolds in a way so that the credits and the contents appear here together with the beginning of the content. And then it goes into the actual content of the book, the essay, its illustrated essays. And at the back, you, as it were, tie up the back with the front by repeating some of the imagery which people have already seen on the front. And then you end on the back where you have an account that is inside the book. By placing the barcode within something which reflects the pattern at the front of the book, you're almost turning people round back onto the front, back onto the content. Now, here is a particular example of using text to grab the person in the bookshop, because after all, people who are in the bookshops are readers and not merely consumers of images. So that if you begin to talk about what is in the book, you may be going some of the way to encouraging people to buy it. And even if it is on the shelf, where you see only the spine of the book, maybe you're going to be intrigued by seeing a lot of words. And when you turn on the back, it even continues with what has started on the front. And this is something, again, which the first version of this book on the left had what is usually described as the blurb on the front, so that the main subtitle of the book, 300 Years of Women's Oppression and the Fight Against it, actually goes at the bottom. When the book was redone, they asked me simply to do it with text over it. And one of the books in which I was involved, we began the text on the front. Of course, it's impossible then to continue the text from the front inside the book, because for all kinds of reasons you can't, because people, well, certainly when this book was produced, people, libraries rebound books so that the continuation of the front of the book, the front of the book would in fact be missing. Although Penguins have now republished this so that the rest of the text does continue inside, and it's actually a travesty of the way we designed the inside. This magazine I worked for actually for 40 years doing covers, so there were a great many covers, and this is simply unchanged because again it was something where a lot of words, all the poets who were in this issue were put on the front. And just anecdotally with this cover, the photograph has nothing to do with Poland. It was taken in London, but I thought it looked like people's idea of what Warsaw might be like. And it was taken by a student with a Polish name, so I thought if it said what his name was on the front, it would give a sort of credibility to it. The other interesting thing, you see, there's a sort of thermometer there on the left-hand side to show that it is a double issue. In other words, it's a kind of measurement that this is thicker to remind people that they're getting two instead of the normal one. Now about covers, this is unusual in the sense that this was a book which was literally a pocket book. That's to say, it was designed for workers actually to carry around with them, particularly people who belonged to a union, because so many people were injured at work and were not aware of it, and they weren't aware of chemicals they were given, for example, to clean machinery, how they were protected on building sites itself. And the front of the book, the whole book tried to use the kind of typographical language which was used by what in England is called the red top newspapers, the most popular newspapers, which in those days usually used Times as the typeface. So they used a lot of bullets and a lot to stimulate, to give a lot of visual stimulus, to break down the content so that it was easily accessible. And since this was meant to be actually a handbook, what was in the book had to be easily found. So the contents page was designed, I hope, as clearly as possible. And the use of bold, italic, and the ordinary weight of Times gave a lot of variety so that emphasis would be given. People who were reading could pick up what they were looking for as quickly as possible. And in newspapers, they were used to reading little, very short bits of information. So the book was designed also using this kind of language. So both the textual language and visual language were similarly as simple and accessible as possible. It even had sections which were almost like a crossword, where there were boxes which ticked, and to make people really engaged with it. So in a conventional book, you wouldn't have something which spelt out, this section is about the hazards, but you would simply go straight into talking about it, so that everything was there and it was repeated and emphasized. A quite different sort of book. This was the cover to a book on English fashion photography. So that is the cover. Often it's the opposite to one way you have a lot of words. There are no words at all. So the intrigue comes not from the verbal content, because after all, it was a book of photographs. Now, anecdotally, you can see, incidentally, the way the cover is wrapping round on the left-hand side when the book is over. Now, in this case, you will see that what happened, in fact, the young person that was working with me at the end of laying out the book, I said, there aren't enough pages. So we're going to do, I can't fit them in. And he simply said, well, why don't you, let's put the title page on the back. And so the miniature of the back of the book is put on the title page together with the introduction to the book. So the back of the book looks like this. And there were no captions to the pictures in the book, so that you had to look through the back of the book, where you saw a miniature black and white version of the photographs that were used throughout the book, and you identified them and saw what they were. At the bottom of each column is the actual title of the photograph. Some of them on the left-hand page under Donald Christie had just 2 photographs listed at the bottom underneath their list of their biography. And the next artist, Elaine Constantine, has 3, and so on. So that in a picture book, in a way, the fewer words that interfere with the pictures, the better. And in a sense, it's more engaging because it's more like a puzzle for the reader. And here you can see the title page, but you unfolded the back of the cover. I'm very keen on using the kind of packaging board which is used to print like cornflakes packets or cereal packets, which is often glazed on one side and rough on the other, so that the outside of the cover was printed on rough paper. So when you felt it in the hand, it also felt slightly rough. But here, it was very glossy and smooth. And so we printed this photograph, which, believe it or not, is a fashion photograph. So it was on the inside of the cover and on the inside of the back cover. So the book was, in a sense, sandwiched between the photograph. The quite different book was a catalogue for an exhibition of paintings by the 19th century English artist Turner, which was many of Turner's pictures, some of which were being restored, they were all taken out of their frames and exhibited without their frames. And the idea was, in a way, to make a comparison between Turner's paintings, certainly his later paintings, and American abstract expressionist paintings. And it doesn't show very well, but in fact, I printed gold inside the book to show that this was what was missing when things were exhibited. And because the notion of the sun was part of the Turner's obsession, this was repeated throughout. One thing about the way the paintings are reproduced is that they all had a tint, a very pale tint around the image, so that the paintings were reproduced, printed straight onto the white paper, but around them wasn't white paper, but a very slight tint, which to try to make the pictures look relatively brilliant. And this was the back of the book. These barcodes are always difficult to handle, and it's often not realized that it's better to put them in a cold color. You can't put them in a warm color because they're not read by the scanner. But also they could be made much smaller than this, of course. Now, about book covers. This was the front cover to an exhibition of photographs. They were photographs taken by international photographers about the family. And the exhibition was called Who's Looking at the Family? Now, this front is printed on a piece of heavy board, the sort of thing that you make files of to classify things, or used to classify papers and filing cabinets. And this was the back. Now, both the front, they had holes cut out of this board, and this was stuck on an ordinary binding, where you can see this pinkish colour, pink being something which I associated with, I don't know, certainly with babies, but it was meant to be a little sweet and have something of the character of this image that is on the front. So that this photograph on the front was the family, who was looking at the family. And who was looking at the family was you. Now it doesn't show very well in this photograph, but there's a piece of mirror board also put behind the cutout back of the book, so that you had, the book became, if you like, an object. It was fairly conventional inside. Now, this question of the book being an object, a three-dimensional object, to try to integrate the fronts and backs, I think maybe I've begun to illustrate that inside, of course, a wrap-up, you have something, you have the case binding, which somehow has to work when people have thrown the wrap-up, the dust cover away, and still relate to the inside of the book. Now, I only showing these because it raises a question which is connected with the business of folding, because often if you are working with photographs and it is a historical document, there may be photographs which don't demand colour, but the way the sheet of paper folds when it is going through the press, it is possible that colour may be available for more economically use only in certain positions on the sheet of paper, therefore in certain positions in the book. So a great deal of juggling has to be done to get these in the right position. And this is the same with the Russian photographs, and I only show this because of this dilemma of if you have horizontal photographs, horizontal images, and you have a vertical book, what do you do? Do you do what has been done here? This is something in a magazine you can always go across a spread and put something horizontal. It's something which is very questionable in a book, and I'm often inclined just to turn the book round. So a landscape picture you have to turn the book round for, but this is it's just interesting as a version. When you're showing it smaller with different text, this is from the same book. Of course, it's not a problem because you can have them across two columns where they don't look too small. This, and similarly, if you're doing a book about film, this is a book about Godard, the French director. You know that all the images are going to be of a particular proportion, so you can work it so that you can devise a grid which will fit the images within it. This is in fact a book which is too complicated to talk about. It's always the lecture. So this is the poster for the garden. Unfortunately, I think in many cases, on the posters I had that mistaken idea of trying to get lots of images on the basis that if the poster is in the metro, people would have a lot to look at and puzzle over. I think it's a questionable idea. But then this was a very complicated job, perhaps one of the most complicated I've ever done. And it relates to folding in a very special way, because this was a travelling exhibition about the role of women in Britain. And it also had a book which went with it. Because it was a travelling exhibition, the whole exhibition had to go into packing cases, and they had to be packing cases small enough to go through a particular door in an aeroplane in Latin America. I worked fortunately with some architect friends, and this, around this, you can see perhaps a more or less triangular spider form on the right-hand side of this image. But I hope you can see perhaps what looks like a woman's dressing table. And on the right-hand side of this, over, you can see an ironing board with an iron and something waiting to be ironed. And on the other side of this, which you can't see, was the students. So there were mock-up rooms which were meant to tell people in other countries. This went to Pesaro in Italy, and they had a rather strange idea of how English women lived. But it did show, you can see in the background of this photograph, the panels which were put on these structures, which were made up of, it depended upon the size of photographic paper. Has your image gone dark? No. But you can see, also it talked about the, on the right-hand side you can see the suffragette movement of the early 20th century, a policeman arresting someone, and you can see in a cage the English Prime Minister at the time, Margaret Thatcher, with Winston Churchill. We thought this would be allowed, but somehow this was designed by the British Council who were allowed. But it's really a question of organising a number of photographs into a structure, but a structure which is more complicated than before. And this was one of the pages of my notebook at the time, which shows these curved structures and trying to devise ways in which the different elements of the exhibition would fit. On the top right of the page, I can see that it's the ABC that is dealing with history. And then below that it goes on to protest. And so on the different things. Work, the family, and so on. Because these were double-sided, it was very complicated because photographs had to be backed up with another photograph on the other side, so that the numbering of them, so that they could be put together by people who'd never seen the exhibition from somewhere else, was extremely complex. But this is what the exhibition looked like. These are two separate photographs. That's one on the left and one on the right. They're joined together. And you can see that also statistics were used. You can see just about in the middle distance another circle there. Isotype figures are shown, for example, show the number of nurses in hospitals. And there are various quotations from feminist warrior workers put onto text. And here you can see the kitchen which was built. So that walking around, it was a very varied experience for British people to see. And this is the book in which the photographs were put. So the structure was really very different. But I often have used the technique of taking details from one photograph and putting and repeating it in another. I think that's probably shown here, that there would be in a circular photograph part of a photograph which was shown being somewhere else to emphasise exactly what it was that someone was doing. And this is the book. Now, I only showed this, not because of the logo, but to show that, of course, folding, in this case, what I did absurdly was to put a mark on the left-hand side of the paper to show where it needs to be folded. In fact, they folded it more or less in the right place, but there's a mark at the top of the page to show where they should have typed this. The instructions have been obeyed. It doesn't matter particularly. I chose this at random out of my files, but in fact, that folding mark exists because it's a folding mark for this is a half sheet of paper or a 2/3 sheet of paper, and the folding mark is in the same place on the 1/8 sheet of paper, which of course is much longer. Now, I'm showing this because this is something I've done just very recently, and why I'm showing it is because of the business of folding. Obviously, a bag made of material is folded. Now, when fabric is printed for something like this, it is printed on a very wide piece of fabric by silkscreen dyes, and you can see that I said that the total width of the fabric is 1400, or the total usable area. So I tried to get 4 bags out of the width of this piece of material. In fact, I found it was impossible. It was too narrow. And this is the instruction that I gave to the fabric printer. Now, because I had to put the British Council logo, which you see at the top right upside down, and I thought it was horrible, I folded it inside the bag, so that what you see at the top here, you don't see in the bag unless you are going to put something in the bag. I told the British Council that people would see it more when they were using the bag than they would notice it on the outside. I'm not sure that's quite true. The lesson that I learned from this is that one should always go to the manufacturer. I went to the printer and watched the printing and saw that was fine. What I didn't do was go to the bag maker. Oh, incidentally, this is still using the same technique as I was using years ago for the white show art gallery, because it's printed. This artwork, you can see, which is taken from my computer, it's shown in cyan blue, which wasn't the blue that was used to print it in. It's to tell the printer that this is only printed not in 4 colours, but just in the blue. And because the British Council logo is meant to be in a particular blue. And so this was printed in blue and black because that meant only 2 printings. And the instructions are written down the side. Now, I've written stitching 42mm down from foam. And at the bottom it says signed print Pantone Blue 295. In other words, not this colour. Now, that was okay as far as the printer was concerned, but not when the bag was made up. This shows what it was like when it was being printed. Obviously, you have to have also some material at the side for turnings. But when the bag was made, The stitching was 42 millimeters down, but it's in quite the wrong place. But it should be in the gap between Giardini and British. That stitching should have gone exactly through the middle. But because I wasn't where it was being made, I didn't see that they hadn't. I assumed that they would turn over some of the image so on the inside of the bag, because as in print you would allow 3 millimeters beyond what you needed. So in fact it's 3 millimeters in the wrong position. So the only lessons always go to where something is being made. Because also for just social reasons, because it's fun, and you get to know the people who are actually doing things, and also you can put things right, or you can change your mind to the degree change the colour. Or many jobs like art gallery, I would stand with the printer mixing the because it's often true that if you specify Pantone colour and you see something being printed, it's nothing like the Pantone colour, although they mix the message. That's unless you want me to talk about books that what I was going to say. But if you'd like to ask anything or anyone want you to go on about other things, just say so. Please ask. I beg your pardon.
I have a question. I saw buongiorno. At your first slides, I saw the typography, which was made manually, and I would like to ask about this typography. This was the type for gallery. I don't remember the name of this gallery. The first project.
The typeface is a German typeface made by Berthold called the Block, or Block Bold, which is it's now digitized. The reason for using it also, at that time, you couldn't get it in England. I was very keen to use it. And so I photographed the type from a specimen book and then pasted it up, letter by letter. All these things are letter by letter. This is history. Because in those days, but I'll go on about it for a bit. The point being that I chose Block because it wasn't short, it had no right angles. So that when you enlarged it photographically, it didn't look out of focus. So that was the main reason for using it. And later, I drew, you see the numerals here, 1918 to 1970. There are lining numerals. Now normally I would use lining figures, numerals, to go with capital letters. But at this stage, you'll see that 22 July, they are lining figures. And there's still lining here, but then there with capitals. So
today it looks very, very modern, very actual.
I'm hoping to find it where because I drew non-lining figures. Was there some? Oh yes, in 1982, Can you just see there? Next to 1723, July 1982 is in non-line figures because that is lower than its letters. Here, at the top here, you can see the two. Well, to make non-line figures was very easy because the only figure you had to read was 2. Because the one you could just take the bottom part of the lowercase I, and the 9 you could move down, and that was about it. So it wasn't a complicated thing. Digitally, I would have to get somebody else to do it. Later, I had, although all the early was pasted on letterhead, even pencil, and everything here was pasted on as a memorandum. It wasn't produced on computer. But this people are amazed by this, doing it letter by letter. I have, unfortunately, here a picture of the letters, and you can see the glue all around. It's not blocked. From the letter. And it's and you can get a lighter version and a condensed. It looks like that.
Any altre question? Ci sono altre domande? Perché magari comincio a farne qualcuna anch'io. Well, I really thank you, Richard, for being so honest and so clear about the way you work, because it doesn't always happen in lecture, because people tend to stress the visual side of their work and don't always go into such detail, explaining how it works and why and when it was done. So this is an extremely interesting aspect of how you present your work now, and thank you for that. And okay, and you work all your career, or mostly all of your career, as an independent designer. Not maybe I heard that you maybe work for a publisher for a short time, but okay. So. Was it, can you talk about this kind of choice you did, the choice of remaining small, working for small clients and for some specific areas like arts and publishing and so on? Because, okay.
It was, in a way, there was no choice other than to work for I don't know how. I did once work in Paris for the publicity studio of the store Galerie Lafayette. But otherwise, I've always worked just as a one-man band and intermittently have one person as an assistant. When I thought I would be too old ever to have to come to terms with computers, but unfortunately, the computers overtook me, and I learned by having people who came to work for me as for work experience, and I'd say that they did the work and I got the experience because I learned from them how to do Quark Express and this all these this sort of thing. And different people came from different schools, and they all had different ways of doing things. So computer skills are very extraordinary, diverse, and very, very limited. And so there's so many things that are impossible. But of course, what the computer has done for my generation is to give so much control. But the problem with computers is that you can make decisions so quickly, and a new thing appears on the screen, and you can, because it's there, it seems wonderful. But when you were pasting up letter by letter, you were thinking about what you were going to do next, or you were listening to the radio. But with a computer, I find it impossible to do anything other than work, because everything is happening so fast. The thing about a computer is that you can adjust. For example, for typography, it's absolutely wonderful, because you can adjust space and you can move things around so easily. The problem is the young people I know who work as designers, they then are sitting at their computer if they're working for a company, and someone comes and stands behind them and says, "Couldn't you make that green?" And in the old days that would be impossible, because the cost would make it prohibitive, and you couldn't make changes without it costing money. So it's that change. It was, for us, I think it was easy, much, much easier, because you were specialists in the doctor. People came to you and said, I've got this problem, I want to tell people about this or that. And now they send you something, by email, all this text, and say, oh, turn it into this or that. And it's not, in the old days, when I first started, when I first taught, every student for any job would produce a questionnaire. So when I worked for somebody who packaged coal, I gave them a long questionnaire asking all the questions about their business and who bought it and how it was packed, everything, so that you had a complete understanding of what their problem was, which wasn't about an advertisement in a local paper. It was about connecting with people who might buy it. You might have ended up having to put something in the local paper. But that wasn't really the problem. But now it's like the patient coming to the doctor and saying, oh, will you cure this with such and such medicament? Not, I've got a pain in my leg, or whatever it is. So the whole relationship between the designer and the client, I think, has changed dramatically because of computers, partly because all this information comes into you as a designer, which you then have to transform into something like what they're expecting. In a way, it's less interesting. So I'm very lucky because I've worked mainly for friends. Or people who've asked me to do things have become friends. So it's only rarely there has been a very easy relationship between designer and client. Please do, because it's nobody.
Thank you, Stefan. Before creation of a book project, for example, this poster, you did the sketch, yeah? You make the sketch by hands, and this sketch there is everything, dates, typography, the place for photo, because now we do everything with the computer. We are just thinking before, okay, we will use accidents, grotesque, and this photo, and so. And after in computer, we are thinking to place this here and this here. And if you can tell a little bit about how to prepare these sketches and the projects. Thank you. to prepare the project of the book.
Well, if there are so many different, my preferred way is to work directly. Would you like to see things? I have got another, is this, if people can go home if they, but I've got another disc which is about books. Would that interest you? Because that would tell you more about books. I would go through it very quickly. Is this true?
Direi che possiamo approfittare dell'opportunità di vedere un altro lato del suo lavoro, visto che il progetto di libri è qualcosa che Richard Hollis sa fare con veramente una capacità fuori dal comune. Avete intravisto qualcosa prima della qualità dei suoi progetti, quindi adesso approfitterei. But it's good for opportunity. Okay, so it's good if you can show us. But they don't want that. People who want to stay are still here, so don't worry.
While you're preparing your next presentation, can I just make a very small, very short question, which is related to your other career as a writer? Can I? Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for the book that you wrote, the one about graphic design history, because not many of us studied on that book, and so we owe you something. Second question is, in this moment, did you ever plan to make a kind of a compendium of that book? Because I feel like lost after a while. Because you just made the last part of the book, which is talking about the contemporarity of graphic design, which is just a little part. It's not really spread out as it should be, probably. And I think I missed that. Do you have any plans of make another book or a compendium or something talking about the more contemporary graphic design?
I have no plans to write about contemporary graphic design, really, because obviously I see it around me, but because it is usually because I'm not into punk or the kind of music which the young people are interested in much of. In my view, so much of it, there's interesting graphic works connected with music. So I don't think I would be able to write about it in any very intelligent way. I see the work in the magazines, but I would find it very difficult to be critical about it, because I think in writing about design you need to have some idea of the people who are at the receiving end, if you like, read what the views are. Also something I feel unsympathetic to, and it's like if you have a book to review. If you think the book is bad, I think you should review it. It's not that I think the design is bad, but I would have no critical apparatus to bring to bear on the work, because the culture comes from this stuff is so much not my, it's a generational thing. And in fact, even to bring that graphic design concise history up to date, I had to talk to a lot of people, young people, simply to get an idea of what to them was important or good and so on. In fact, some of you're obliged as a historian to write about work which you find you're deeply unsympathetic to. Even people who've come to London, for example, to lecture, who I find so unsympathetic, yet that I realise that they're also very important, because, and I suppose I can say why I think they're important, but it's very awkward to write about things of that sort. I think also because it's too close to us, it's much easier to write about something, because if you like, the things have settled, so that what is important has, you can see its historical place, whereas the more recent things, you can only see its place at the moment. And it would be difficult to assign values to it. I think that's inevitably a historian, particularly someone who is also a designer, is bound to ascribe values to things, or even implicitly. And so I don't think I could do it. In fact, I'm trying to stop designing on doing writing and just publishing what other people write, which is in the literary sphere, not in the design sphere. Maybe you just also probably as you get older, probably become less able to assimilate a very variety of work. Work is now so varied all over the world. It's not just very important things. It's also a question of language, of course. But if you don't understand, or if you're unable to read the language, or sit with something, then it's very difficult. For example, I don't think I could write about Chinese design in any intelligent way, because the culture is so foreign, and the language. I mean, it's very strange that graphic design has been one of its first translations was into Korea. And I couldn't write about the really. If one of your colleagues wanted something said about book design, which I was going through very, very quickly. But because this is how I would go about it, how people have because there was a move to try to make books into a different medium after the Second World War. Initially before with Hollis and Kepler from the Bauhaus, who tried with books like Language of Vision and Vision Motion, tried to make these people produce books like this, trying to suggest that books should reflect the age in which they were made. Like the chair in the top left is obviously from the 18th century and reflects its time, whereas the Eames below is obviously reflecting what was then our time and so on. And the fact that the book dates from say the 15th century and hadn't changed much, this was thought to be foolish. This was a writer I worked with, John Virgil, and this is because I think the contact with the writer is in a way the most important thing. And what we're left with as well designers is this, is what's on the screen now, these blank pages into which we have to fit. Now, this was the image I was trying to find. When we asked how much went about designing, the notion of a book, the notion of a flat plan, seeing what the chapters are, what is contained within, and then working. This was quite a small catalogue for an exhibition. So that it didn't need a great deal of planning because it was quite open. But it could always be done with a flat plan of this sort. And then on the right-hand side you will see how the page is structured. Because I plainly decided it had to be in 2 columns because probably when I talked about having a landscape picture and a vertical picture, books being mainly vertical, if you've got different proportional pictures, a square, which can be economical because you can get 12 pages out of an A-size sheet, 12 or 24. It can be an economical thing to do. So that's how I would plan to start it. And usually, and if possible, sit with the author and talk about what they wanted to do. I'll just go through. This is one of the early unjustified left Eric Hill type of. This is by Edward Johnson, the man who did the London Underground lettering. This was how he made a book about writing and illuminating lettering, which I think is an absolutely classical book, because although it looks a terrible mess, it's as though it is being stolen. So if you look at the page on the right, he's used only one typeface, but he's actually used so many varieties of it, rather like as it were before, to break up the text so that it can be followed very, it's practical typography. I only show this because it's set in Gill typeface, and in that earlier essay on typography, the page I showed said that the only place you can't use Gill is for an ecclesiastical text, and this is for a this is that. So you've seen this today. Doesn't change. So that this was a book where the cover tried to reflect the content, and this is the inside of it. And these, it's all going automatically on the new books. And this is a book where I sat with the author all the time, pasted things on. This is a book about immigrants in Europe. And the reason for these 2 parts of the photograph on the right is to show that the person arrived, the family kept one half of the photograph home, and the immigrant, when he got, say, from Turkey to Germany, would send the other half. Then if they put them together, he really had arrived. He wasn't being cheated by some traffic. Oh, this is an example of turning a picture round, the landscape picture on its side, which I think is something particularly in a book of this size. This is how not to do. This is a famous book by the historian, artist Ernest Gombrich, which shows that there's a variety of paintings on the right. And this is a new paperback pocket version of the same book, where it has 2 bookmarks. So that instead of having the painting where it's talked about on the page, it has the painting like this, and you have 2 bookmarks to go from where it's talked about in the text of the back as long as this picture described, I think, 2 pages. As you see, and these are internal pages of this book, which again, well, it was done, since it's a book about a television program, or a series of television programs, this is an example of taking the portraits of the people in the left-hand painting. It's trying to show that they were disgraceful bourgeois landowners exploiting people who can't quite be still working their pay and the right. And so, I mean, they do look very sinister when they're taken out of this landscape context. Now, the type is all set in bold type because to make so that it would be as heavy as the images, so that people wouldn't, as they normally do, just skip through a book about art and look at the pictures. You more or less had to read it. It was also to emphasize the television program, and you had to read it. In a television program, you can listen and you can look, but in a book, you can only read and look separately. So this was trying to get over that split. And here the images are presented almost as they were in the television program, one by one, interspersed within the text. And for example, the way the text speaks, it says, this is a landscape of a cornfield with birds flying out of it. Look at it. Then turn the page. And then underneath it is written, this is the best picture that Van Gogh painted before, the last picture that Van Gogh painted before he killed himself. In other words, saying that if you know that a caption can actually change the way you look at something. That's what I saw. This you saw. This, I'm sorry, this is. Perhaps the rest don't talk about books, but I think probably I've answered your question about how you went on the designer that you did.
No, my question was before designing, you made a lot by pencil on paper.
Yes, that was in pen perhaps, but it was on paper.
You do all the book and after you design.
Yes, yes. We wouldn't do all, but you would work out a structure where you would go through. The problem now is that something comes in text not as pages, but it comes as an email, which makes life impossible because you then have to print it out and so on. This so I think that is enough.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Ci sono altre domande da parte vostra? Credo. Ok.
Hi. I wanted to ask you about the fact that you had two careers, it seems, and how you maybe juggled it, or it seems like you fused it clearly, but was there ever going back and forth? Because I'm on sort of a similar path. I have two careers and I'm trying to fuse them together, and I just wanted to hear your experience with writing and designing and how you put them together.
You mean being a designer and a writer? Although it means if you're writing a book, you have to say to the people you're working for, I'm sorry, I'm terribly busy, so I won't be able to work for you for it. And the thing about, you have to design to earn enough money to write, because you don't make any money to write. I mean, it's a crazy thing. It's probably just vanity. And I can tell you that I wrote my graphic design history book almost by mistake. What happened was that I said to a colleague, if you'd like me to read it before you hand it in, I'll be happy to do so. I've been interested anyway, maybe if there's something that I noticed left out. And I said to him after about a couple of years, I said, how is it going? And he said, oh, I just had it back from the publisher. I said, I can't go on with it. And for some extraordinary and stupid reason, I said, well, I'll take it over. And that was what happened. So I didn't use anything that he'd done at all, because he used graphic design more as art rather than as design. He approached it from a completely different view. But I don't find it very difficult, but it's partly a question of honouring, in a way, that the people who've done work which I admired. And I've done a very big book about Swiss graphic design, because the designers whom I met when I was very young were very nice to me and talked to me, showed me things, and who for a very short time, in fact, influenced me. I felt people don't understand what they were doing, and that it was important, and I like it, and I think other people should like it, and understand what was in it. But it's a lot of work, and as I said, it's not even much. Sometimes it's fun, but actually you're usually in tears at some point. It's really hard, but that's all. But in a way I don't see them as separate, because in both cases I was able to design the book. And the awful thing is that friends of mine who are writers don't have any control over how their books are designed. And often, when they're published, and you just feel so sorry for them, because the book won't open. If the grain of the paper is going the wrong way, or the paper is horrible, the binding is horrible, the jacket isn't expressing the content of the book, and it's the whole business of publishing is very, very strange. That's why I'm starting to publish myself, and you'll see maybe that even if you do it yourself, things go wrong.
Working in this way and with some small publishers and small productions, do you feel closer to the audience? And do you have the idea to reach some specific audiences? Do you feel closer to the audience when you to the audience, to the public?
Maybe I'll understand better in Italian. Do I feel closer to my audience, to my readers? Do you mean because I work on my own? Yes, I think it's true that often designers in large agency or design group are, there is an intermediary. There's an art director, or there's these terrible people who are the marketing people. Absolute tragedy. Because so often now, you see, you have also many art galleries. There's some designer who has given a specific set of rules. You can only work to. Now, for example, the British Council, which does the Biennale and did that big exhibition which I showed. Now, you cannot work for them unless you're registered with them as a designer. So everything has become much more difficult for designers. So if it's possible for people to work on their own so much, that's wonderful. And now designers used to be known by their names, and now they're known by some other name. And one of the people who worked for me, because I was doing a report called Tomato, they called me Potato. And in the back of one of the catalogues, it says photographs by Potato. And I didn't know this fellow at all of this stuff. It became a sort of overstrong group. So, and then it's chance that it's always chance that I've worked on. Because I've always thought it's best to work at home. And if you work outside at home, to work so that way you can be home for lunch.
tornare a casa per pranzo e quando io insegnavo vivevo vicino all'università, quando ero investitrice vivevo vicino al posto di lavoro, mi sono fatto io un pezzo vicino al posto di lavoro, sono addirittura lavorare in casa. Anche gli immobili, non so, allora se forse ora è una situazione molto più difficile per voi data la congiuntura attuale.
Hello. We saw a lot of works during this lecture, and in a lot of them you said that you try to cut down the prices to economize. I don't know if this is the right word. I was just wondering if this was somehow related just to the client, or it was also your aim. I mean, how can I say, like a kind of good place where to live in your work. That's it. Thank you.
It's absolutely right that I would try to economize because it was fun. I would say, oh, well, we could do this or we could do that. And they say, of course, they say, oh, wonderful, because they're getting more. It's added value, and it's more fun. If you just do, otherwise you're tending to do more what you're told. So it is something which is generated, yes, I think in my case, I generated the idea because it was more fun. Thank you very much.